Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. My name is Edward Smaldone. I'm the director of the Aaron Copland School of Music, and it's a pleasure to have you all here this evening and to have these wonderful people with me. It's been quite a ride so far with the Bernstein Mass, and it promises to be a rather riotous and glorious one yet to come. It's really been a gift for the School of Music to work on this piece because it's one that deals with the turmoil of the 1970s, and we're also dealing with quite a bit of turmoil in the 21st century as well. So the struggles of man, the aspirations of man, the questions of faith, these are things that have not gone away. It's a gift to work on this glorious piece. It's also been a gift to have Maurice Perez at the helm, I must say.
Thank you.
For all of this. So we really hope that the audience is moved, and I think we're on the way toward doing that, very much so. So the very first thing I'd like to do is introduce the people who are here. Starting at my right is Michael Hume. Michael is currently an administrator. He's the music program coordinator at Adelphi University. He has actually been helpful in recruiting some excellent singers from the Adelphi program who are here with us, and they are in our master's program now and are playing prominent roles in the Mass. Michael was in the liturgical choir in 1971 when the piece was premiered. He played the celebrant after that. He tells me more than 60 times, including the first public television performance in 1974. So he's someone who knows the piece, I should say, rather well. And to my immediate right is Lorca Perez, who happens to be Maurice's daughter. That's the least of her accomplishments, I should say, perhaps. She's an actor and a stage director. She's a theater company director of the Multi-Stages Theater and a co-president of the League of Professional Theater Women. So she's a seasoned theater professional, and she's been doing the stage direction for Mass, and I've watched them work together, and it's fun.
It's exciting.
It's kind of interesting.
Sparks fly.
That's right. And to my left is Jamie Bernstein. Jamie is Leonard Bernstein's daughter, and she's a narrator and a writer and someone who lived through so much, not only of this piece, but of so much else. And I'm sure you've got wonderful stories to tell, and we're really excited that you're here and very glad that you could join us. It's a real pleasure. And then the kid on the left, on the far left, is my colleague, Professor Maurice Perez. Maurice has been professor of music at Queens College and conductor of the orchestra since 1984.
30 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
30 years. I was 6.
I was 54 when I
got
took
there.
the job.
And he also was Leonard Bernstein's assistant conductor with the New York Philharmonic, and worked with Bernstein for many years, and was the conductor. We have 2 people from the original production from 1971. We had hoped to have another person, Gordon Davidson, the director. He wasn't able to travel. We're sorry about that.
Yeah, he hoped to, but he's in bed.
So I don't think we'll be at a loss for things to say.
All right.
Is my suspicion. And so without further ado, I think what we'd like to do first is to talk about the Bernstein Mass then. And to have the people here, especially those with the long institutional memory, talk about those glory days and what it was like, and who'd like to start? You want to start, Michael?
Well, Maurice, why don't I start and then you'll just pick up the ball.
Of course, no, don't worry. There is no institutional memory. Let's begin with that one.
Well, okay. Who could remember?
And is this picking me up multi-directionally? Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Yeah.
Well, why don't I start because I was, in fact, the Washington native who was able to join Mass. So I was born in the city where the Kennedy Center opened in September of 1971. And the first hall or space in the center to open was the Opera House, and that was with the debut, the first performance of Mass, written for the occasion by Lenny, in memory of John F. Kennedy. He felt very, very proud that Jacqueline Kennedy, saw the piece and liked the piece as much as she did. But before we get into the piece itself, it's just the fact that this transformed Washington and continues forever. The Kennedy Center has transformed Washington. So it was not only an incredible production of something that had never been tried before in that way, but it was the beginning of a new world of culture and music in Washington, D.C. So I was lucky because while they were bringing professionals down from New York to play the street people or the congregation, and of course Maurice and the Alvin Ailey Dance Company came down from New York, but they had to hire some locals. They couldn't bring everybody from New York, so thank goodness they used a local conductor to train the liturgical choir, who sings the Latin text of the Mass, more or less in support of the celebrant throughout, and thank goodness I was in a position to be in that choir. So the first time I met the maestro would have been probably at a rehearsal, in a rehearsal room somewhere, to see how the choir was doing.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Please, take it. Go ahead.
Someone said his father is a world-famous music critic.
Right.
Yeah, Paul Hume, and we were, yeah. So
That's another story.
we were. Someone said to me, Paul Hume's son is in the choir. I said, don't show me who he is. Don't tell me, please. Because we'd want a good review. Paul Hume was a Catholic. We were nervous about that aspect of the piece. And it was just a marvelous thing that I only got to meet Michael the second year. I mean, to get to work with him on a one-on-one basis, which is an extraordinary story. And I'll start it and you finish it.
Okay.
We were in Philadelphia. And we had two celebrants, and they were rotating, Alan Titus and
David Cryer.
David Cryer. And they were both living in New York and traveling to Philadelphia by train to make the concerts. And we got a call from Alan, well, I can't make tonight, we'll call David. And David, I'm stuck on a train. It is 10 of 8, and Gordon comes to me, Gordon Davidson, and says, should we cancel? And out of the choir comes this kid. He says, I can do it. I said, what can you do? He says, I can do the celebrant. I had to run through the fraction a little bit.
I think you walked into my dressing room.
You continue.
Okay, let me correct a couple of facts,
Okay.
if I may.
Oh, please do.
Because, we know
Rashomon.
facts should never get in the way of a good story.
Rashomon.
But buried deep in the program of that summer tour with Alan and David was a little sign, a line that says, Celebrant Understudy Michael Hume. So
I didn't know that.
I was the understudy. But beyond that, they gave me bupkis, okay? I'd sung the role once through with the rehearsal pianist. I'd never done the blocking, ever, because there were two celebrants. But what I had done, Maurice and everyone, was watched this production from a year before and for weeks with these two guys from my choir, just every night, watching. So Gordon came up to me at 10 minutes to 8, and his question was, can you do it? And I said, yes, I can. That's, He said, first of all, you're late, and second of all, can you do it? And then you came running into the dressing room. You started the Gloria TB, and I sang it in rhythm, and you said, fine, let's do this.
Save the rest.
And 20 minutes later, Gordon made an announcement, and 25 minutes later, I was
We held the curtain a little bit. Yeah.
pretending I could play guitar and singing simple songs.
But the cast talked him through it. I mean, they whisper him, go to the right, go to
On
the left,
occasion,
stay here.
I would go up to someone and say, where do I go now? Anyway, so that is a great
It was
story.
a very exciting
And
evening.
it was very exciting, and is what led to my being able to play the role of the celebrant so many times, and eventually in Kansas City with the
That's right,
Philharmonic
with
under
me.
Maurice. But
Wow, that's great.
anyway, it is a great story at the beginning of my career. But
Jamie, why don't,
Mass,
why don't you tell us something of your memory of the Mass?
Well, I think I'll back up to how it all began. I don't know whether you know this story.
I
I'm
don't
sure
think
you
I'm
do.
listening.
But the way it all began was that Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis called my father on the phone
Oh.
and asked him since they were, just about to start building the Kennedy Center, she asked him if he would run the Kennedy Center. Run it.
Did not know that.
And who could say no to Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis? So he said, okay, I'm so honored. And he hung up the phone and went, ah! And he ran to my mother and said, what am I going to do? I'm like, I can't run the Kennedy Center. I'm not an administrator. And even, I would be terrible at it. And anyway, I don't want to do it. But I couldn't say no to Jackie. So it fell to my mother to bail out my father.
To run the Kennedy Center?
To call Jackie back.
Oh.
And say, oh, Lenny is so honored and it's so wonderful, but don't you think it might be a better thing if he were perhaps, say, to, write the inaugural piece for the opening? Don't you think maybe that would be a nice idea? And so eventually she came to her senses and Mrs. Kennedy Onassis said, okay, he can write the inaugural piece. And that's how Mass came to be born.
Fabulous. And the eventual first artistic director of the Kennedy Center was Roger Stevens,
Right. A much
one
better
of the
choice,
producers
really.
of West Side Story. So they had a
Great
good
man.
That's a better fit.
few people to recommend
To say
for
the
that
least.
position.
Yes.
Oh, that's a great story.
That's
So
a
that's
great
how it all
story.
began.
Oh, that's delightful.
Yeah.
I was working on Candide. It was a national tour. We were rehearsing in L.A., and we were going to San Francisco and then cross the country to New York, hopefully. And Lenny was meanwhile in L.A. working he was supposed to be there to oversee the Candide production, but he was also working in what we call the Mass Factory, in that hotel that has little private lodges around the pool. And
The Beverly Hills
Right.
Hotel?
Yeah. And Alvin Ailey was there, and Gordon Davidson was there. I was jealous as hell. And he came in to a dress rehearsal for Candide. We did it with four-hand piano, or two pianos. I worked real hard to get it all nice, neat, and clean. And he started giving notes around 10, all about text. All about text. Rarely did he say that. I can't remember Lenny saying to me too fast, too slow. But text, I don't hear this word. It's like if you drop one word, the sense of the moment will be lost. 1 o'clock in the morning, I was there since 9. 1 o'clock in the morning, we're going to the elevator, and Lenny said, we have to talk. I said, Lenny, I'm pooped. We have to talk about Mass. And he said, we'll be two sides of a coin. You'll prepare it with me. I'll do the opening, and then you'll take over. And that was the arrangement. We were at a party at Gordon's later that week, and they made it official. So I took the Candide to San Francisco, came back to L.A., and I left it, and I joined the Mass Factory, what we call the Mass Factory, and then I was on board. The actual fact of conducting it came a week before the performance. I got a call. Mr. Bernstein feels that he would like to be in the house watching the show, seeing its entirety, rather than buried in the pit. Would you conduct the opening? So he wants you to conduct the opening.
Right.
Don't tell anyone. Should I tell this story? Don't tell anyone. My hand's on the phone. All right, boom. I picked up the phone. I called my manager and said, call the best public relations person you know. And that's how that history happened. To this day, Alan Titus's blog says that Lenny was conducting the opening. That's okay.
Not correct.
Really?
Yeah.
To my knowledge, Lenny never conducted an entire live performance of
No,
Mass.
only the recording.
Yeah.
Only the original Columbia recording. And I was lucky that he was a great supporter of the Jimmy Carter campaign for presidency, because at one concert he was joined by Rosalind Carter, and they did the Lincoln portrait. And I got to sing 3 or 4 selections from Mass under Lenny's baton for the only time in my whole life. No
That he
matter how
could
many times I played it. Other than that, it was.
Yeah, well,
the few times I got to, just that one concert.
The recording
with
is
the Democratic
superb.
Party.
The recording is superb.
The recording is.
Unfortunately, there's no video from the first production. We've searched and searched. There's nothing. It's very sad because it was spectacular. There was an endless amount of money to do whatever we had to do, and it was spectacular. Yeah, I know, Ed. Lorca, what do you remember about Mass?
I can't believe that
remember-
there wasn't somebody with a phone in the audience
Not
kidding.
at the time.
I'm
Nah.
kidding.
I remember sitting in the conductor's box next to Jackie Onassis's box.
Wow.
With my mother. And it was quite fabulous. And Jackie, Mrs. Onassis, sat there and smiled throughout the entire time, even when they were yelling, "God damn good," and all this stuff, and throwing down the chalice, and she just kept smiling.
The facade
And
didn't
it was
crack.
quite fascinating. So I was very fascinated by her performance,
Yes.
actually. But I remember the excitement. You know, I think that's the one thing I can come
That was
away
the opening
with.
in '72.
It was so exciting.
Yeah.
And just so, you know, and I remember I curtsied when I met her. It just
so
seemed
cute.
right, royalty, you know. I'm honored now to actually have the opportunity to direct it. But
Yeah.
what a great performance that was.
And
Well, go ahead.
Maurice mentions Alan Titus. I was saying to a friend of mine earlier this evening that as much as, and I loved doing the role, and I let other people talk about how I did the role. Alan Titus was the best. It was
Wow.
just,
It was a miracle.
it was the most amazing melding of voice and role that
Yeah.
I've ever heard. And all celebrants bring something different to it. Victor, whom you'll hear tonight, will sound different from many of those who have played the role before, and he'll bring his own to it. Something about Alan's timbre just at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah. He
you know,
was
was fabulous.
his fach was not really baritone or tenor. And he was in fact debating it. Lenny later on had him do the Lord Nelson Mass
Yeah.
on tenor, and Alan said, "I don't think I'm happy up there."
No.
So-
he went on to do a lot of baritone work.
Now he's
as
a bass
he matured.
baritone.
He matured, he worked with Beverly Sills
Oh,
in New York
really?
City Opera. It's a role, and I'm sure many of you in this audience understand what I'm going to say, a musical audience, I'm sure. It's a role that Lenny wrote that you hear Tony of West Side
Yes,
Story
absolutely.
in it. You hear Candide
Yes.
of Candide in it, in the role of the celebrant. He loved this range for certain male parts.
He
Now,
did.
when he wanted to write a kick-butt tenor role, he could, no question. I mean, look at A Quiet Place, the wonderful opera that Lenny wrote late in his life. Now, there's some wonderful tenor singing contrasting with the baritones. But when it came to this sweet, sensitive young man part, he just loved this role. If you want to call it a Peleos tenor or Peleos
Yeah, well,
baritone.
it's a Helden tenor. Lenny talked
Peleos
to
baritone, excuse me.
he
Yeah.
talked to me about that.
Yeah.
In my current book, I do mention that Lenny said to me, "I like a baritone with a high A or B flat."
Right.
And he mentioned Tony, you know, and he says, not a lot of them, but he's got to get up there, and of course the baritone has the speaking voice of a man,
Right.
whereas a tenor voice has this.
a little higher.
It's an artificial placement for the male voice, so that was his explanation to
I
me,
see, yeah.
and
And I was a bit more of a tenor
yeah.
who could sing low, and Alan was a lyric baritone in the true sense of the word. So interesting, just I hear that sound in so
Yeah.
many of Lenny's roles.
Well, before we move on to some of the current production, are there more things people want to say about the original? Any other stories?
Oh,
that
there
we
were so
should know?
many.
Oh.
There were so many things to say about it.
Yes.
I mean, you know,
Oh, I've got a question for you. What were
Oh, all
four
right.
Jewish guys doing writing a mass?
you may well ask, and we could talk about that forever too. But for one thing, we have to always remember what was going on in the United States politically at the time. It was right in the middle of the Vietnam War, and there was just such a political schism in popular culture, and not unlike today, actually. That's why Mass is particularly resonant at the moment. But by the time the Kennedy Center opened, Nixon was president, and the Vietnam War was raging away, and so it was problematic for Nixon to be appearing at the inauguration of the Kennedy Center, and you know it wasn't such an easy and pleasant task, and in the end, the FBI turned up evidence that there was a secret message in the Latin text that was deliberately put there to embarrass the president, and therefore he should not attend the inauguration of the Kennedy Center. So you know what the secret message was? Dona
Nobis
Nobis
Pacem.
It's just a standard liturgy, of course. But those geniuses in the FBI determined that they put it in there on purpose, you see,
J.
to
Edgar
embarrass the president. Yeah,
J. Edgar Hoover never studied Latin.
And that was just the beginning of his problems.
I could elaborate a little bit on the other two questions. Jewish people working and composing a mass. I'm discovering more and more how Jewish the piece is in various ways. If you look at the Latin Mass, the Kyrie is Greek. Lenny told us that. The Kyrie is a universal form, and he was a Catholic president, and I think it'll work as a dramatic work. Kyrie is Greek. Credo is Shema Yisrael. I believe in one God. Dona Nobis, Sanctus is Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. I don't know, it's word for word.
Sanctus,
And it's
Sanctus,
sung in
Holy,
Hebrew.
holy,
And
holy.
it's sung in Hebrew, and Lenny breaks into the Hebrew on the word soul. When the celebrant sings, "In my soul, Kadosh." I mean, just amazing. It's such a I'm gonna cry. It was such a personal statement.
There's a historical connection between Christianity and Judaism. I know. You know.
But so it's, and then at the end of the last few days of rehearsal, he wore this big wooden cross.
Oh, goodness.
And I say now I'm writing now, and I say that he was reaching out his Jewish soul to any religion that would love peace. You know, it was so powerful to be there.
And then the other side of that coin is a certain Roman Catholic priest of Catholic University, who shall remain nameless, had the audacity to say after seeing the production, "Well, I don't think Mr. Bernstein understands."
He studied so hard.
That was his knee-jerk reaction. On the contrary, the Bernstein intelligence that I knew and encountered on a
yes.
personal level was phenomenal. His awareness of cultures, his knowledge in detail. He knew more about the Mass than this good priest did.
Yeah, well, he was a
And-
compulsive scholar, so he researched it to the hilt.
Right.
Yes. So when you see Mass, how many people have seen or heard Mass already and know the piece well? Okay. Well, then you know how specifically the composer reacts to the Latin text and its literal meaning and its symbolic meaning for the Catholic Church. This is not something you just waltz into and blindly, for God's sake. The flip side of that are the Jesuits at Georgetown University, where I was a student, a couple of whom came to me after the production and said, he doesn't understand the Mass, but more something like, "Michael, I felt like doing that. I felt times when I wanted to do this
Oh my
with
God.
the gifts." This is a Jesuit telling me
Right, yeah.
what he wanted to do at Mass,
Right.
because they saw the world around them.
Right.
And they were leaving. There were priests leaving the order at the time. There were nuns who were leaving the sisterhood at the time. They were speaking their conscience. They were being arrested. It's part of the epistle letters in Mass.
Yes.
The priest in prison, and so on. So, but when a Jesuit from my university said there were times when he didn't know what he was doing up there,
Right.
I said, "This man doesn't understand the Mass. He
Right.
totally gets it.
Yeah,
Totally
he
gets it."
gets it.
What was the reception for the piece then?
The reception for the piece was
What was the general reception?
fantastic, unbelievably fantastic.
There were a few.
But it was also very controversial as well. And there was a diocese near Cincinnati that insisted on canceling a local production.
I conducted
There
that.
was-
We sold out.
Right. But there was some controversy, and that was all part of the point in a way. I think that my father wanted the piece to be confrontational in some ways, and it was, but it's too bad he didn't live long enough for the day when Pope John Paul II requested that Mass be performed in the Vatican.
Right.
I'm really sorry my dad missed that.
Yeah. So I guess the Pope didn't understand the Mass either.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Maybe we can get someone to condemn it now, so we sell some more tickets.
There was, so,
That's
but
happening
overall, the
nearby,
public
isn't it?
reception was wonderful. Except for one woman who came more than once, because I heard her each year. I think I heard her once in '71 and
72 in the Met.
in both.
Yeah.
Well, no, in the Kennedy Center. This was always.
She also did it there.
Well, anyway, I don't know why she bought a ticket to come, but anyway, Alan got to the point. He smashes the relics, and from the balcony comes this female voice. I can't quite do it. Sacrilegious!
You know, it's
filling
funny.
the house.
There's
She
this.
did it
And then she
twice
stopped.
over
Yeah,
10
after
She
days.
watched the rest.
Fabulous.
He throws the holy vessels down, and then he goes through this mad scene. He spills his guts. That's what I say. And at the end of that, he walks into the pit, and there's this immense silence. The two chords that hold the whole piece together, C minor, the Jewish soul, and A major, the Christian soul, are held way down low in the orchestra, and they go to silence. And I said, Lenny, how long do I hold the silence? Until you're afraid that Mrs. Schwartz is going to applaud. So you'll know. He says, you'll know, you'll know. And so this fear was only happened once, and she planned it. I mean, she worked it out good. Yeah. Anyway.
She had to know the show well enough to be ready.
Yeah.
For her cue, for her cue.
It did great business, by the way, in Washington and at the Met the year later.
Well, I must say, in all the years I did it, any productions I did, both in choir and as the celebrant, I never heard a single boo. Not once. Not ever. I had one woman scream sacrilege. That's all the only negative thing I ever heard from an audience.
Okay. Well, I hope no one's going to do that now. But I think we've just gone to get our
I
our
want to say that
celebrant.
Victor should say something to you about. He works in a church frequently. He sings in a Catholic church, and
And is Catholic.
he sees this piece in a different way than I ever did. Victor, I was just mentioning you.
Ladies and
It's our
gentlemen,
celebrant.
Victor Starsky.
Saying the question was, how
Come forward.
authentic is the mass text and the way Bernstein approaches the piece itself. You told me you felt very comfortable with it.
Absolutely, yes. My mother and father raised me Catholic, and I've been working in a church for years. I'm actually a church cantor, and that's why this role has been really wonderful for me to perform. I have so much personal involvement with it,
kid's 23.
and in learning the Mass, really becoming a part of the piece, it is, structurally a Catholic Mass, really. But Leonard Bernstein has infused it with so much external culture and also religious pieces from Judaism and secular questions and such, things like that. It really is a wonderful fusion of Catholic Mass and everything else. So.
Okay. That's a good idea. We should also, Yeonju, this is our amazing pianist, Yeonju Namkoon.
Victor, tell us what you're going to
See
sing.
what this looks like. You will hear what it looks like. But I think you should, we'll edit it out. You should just make sure, because I don't know if this is too loud.
It's fine. It's love.
No? We'll be all right?
Perfect.
Okay, fine. I just didn't want you to be surprised by it.
He got here so I can watch.
Do you want to tell us what you're
Yes,
doing?
tell us what you're going to do and put it in context.
All right. Well, I've chosen two excerpts from the Mass itself to perform for you tonight. One of which is very well known. It's a simple song, which is the first time we see the celebrant within the production. He's dressed in plain clothes. He comes in with his guitar. It's really before he becomes the person who he is in the finale. So he's a lone man who is rejoicing in the Lord, in the goodness of the Lord, and he's doing it in the most simple way as a street musician, just a man and his guitar, or a man and his piano.
In this case.
So
Okay.
that's our first song, simple song. Sing God a simple song, louder, louder. Make it up as you go along, louder, louder. Sing like you like to sing. God loves all simple things. For God is the simplest will sing the Lord a new song, to praise him, to bless the Lord. I will sing his praises while I live, all of my days. Blessed is the man who loves the Lord. Blessed is the man who praises him. Louder, 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 and walks in his ways. I will lift up my eyes to the hills from whence comes my help. I will lift up my voice to the Lord, singing louder, louder. For the Lord is my shade, is the shade upon my right hand, and the sun shall not smite me by day, nor the moon by night. Blessed is the man who loves the Lord. Louder, 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 and walks in his ways. Louder, 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 louder-dee-da-dee-day, all of my days.
Beautiful.
We have a surprise for you. We have a responsive choir here. We have two women from the street chorus. We have three. Four from the street chorus. Okay. And Michael, and we're gonna do the responses.
That's great.
Okay.
So this next selection is known as the Epistle, or the Word of the Lord, and it falls towards the middle of the Mass, and it comes to the point where the congregation of the celebrant, he's now amassed a certain amount of followers, and the congregation is questioning not necessarily just him, but also their faith. Why do we place our faith in the dogma of the church? Why do we pray? Why do we confess? What do we get from giving so much to an entity that doesn't respond? And after a really wonderful meditation, the celebrant comes down with his book, his epistle, and he reads an excerpt from it about the word of the Lord, trying to, ease their questioning, their pain. And other members of the congregation, they join in with him, voicing their own concerns, but also reaffirming their faith and the strength with which they choose to live that faith. So this is the word of the Lord, and I'm glad I have my friends here with me. Brothers, this is the gospel I preach, and in its service I have suffered hardship like a criminal, yea, even unto imprisonment. But there is no imprisoning the word of God. You can lock up the bold men. Go and lock up your bold men and hold men in it's risen, wash it risen like a god. But you cannot imprison the word of the Lord. No, you cannot imprison the word of the Lord. For the word was at the birth of the beginning. It made the heavens and the earth and set them spinning. And for several million years, it's withstood all our forums and fine ideas. It's been rough, it's been tough, but it appears to be winning. There are people who doubt it. There are people who doubt it and shout it aloud. There are local vocal yokos who we know collect a crowd. They can fashion a rebuttal that's as subtle as a sword, but they're never gonna scuttle the word of the Lord. No, they're never gonna scuttle the word of the Lord. All you big men of merit, all you big men of merit who ferret our flaws, you rely on our compliance with your science and your laws. Find a freedom to demolish while you polish some award, but you cannot abolish the word of the Lord. No, you cannot abolish the word of the Lord. For the word created mud and got it going. It filled our empty brains with blood and set it flowing. And for thousands of regimes, it's withstood all our forums and fancy schemes. It's been tough, and yet it seems to be growing. All you people of power, all you people of power, your hour is now. You may plan to rule forever, but you never do somehow. So we wait in silent treason until reason is restored, and we wait for the season of the word of the Lord. We await the season of the word of the Lord. We wait for the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Michael. Aren't we lucky?
Yeah. Should we slide down a little and
Yeah.
take some
Make a
room?
little room for Victor. So now, we can talk a little bit perhaps about the current production.
Isn't it beautiful? Yeah. And he's still in college.
You
so
wore each
it's
other's
pretty
moccasins.
amazing.
I'm okay, thanks.
Okay.
Worn each other's, thank you.
So,
So new.
Oh,
The
well,
mass
tell
now.
us, Victor.
I think one of the most wonderful things that I have in the performance of this role is the opportunity to work with Maestro Perez and, of course, Miss Lorca Perez. It's really, it's an honor. It's an opportunity to work with people that are so knowledgeable and so experienced, and they know every little detail. So as a musician and as somebody who really cares about the music, that is priceless. So thank you.
Bravo.
What I enjoy doing with all of my friends who are here with me and came to see is we get to apply the sentiment of the 1960s and 70s to a modern world. So the world that we live in, which is in turmoil, nobody's sure whether we're going to perish from Ebola or foreign terrorism or run out of money before we can afford to live on our own. It's really a scary time, I think, as a young person. And where do we look for answers? Do we look to God? Do we look to the people that have come before us? How do we do it? So the celebrant has questions. I have questions.
Right.
We all have questions. Yeah.
That's, it really hits home. No matter what generation you live in, this piece is timeless.
I think you look is the question. I mean, that's what you do. I mean, as a species, that's what we do. We look, and that's the basis of virtually every religion, is to look for answers. So there is a universality to it, despite the fact that it is within the context of the Roman Catholic Mass. That's really just standing in for man looking for answers, I think.
Can I jump in?
Please.
I didn't realize that Victor was going to sing the word of the Lord tonight, but it is the word of the Lord, the epistle of the Mass, at which letters are read. First, the celebrant reads from scriptural letters, and then members of the street congregation read their letters. They're reading letters they've written, and so on. And, but, oh my God, Jamie and everyone, I mean, is there anything less current, is there anything more current than the words, "Oh, you big men of merit,
Yeah.
you big men of merit who
Power.
ferret out flaws"?
Right.
This is last night's news. This is last night's, depending on your
Tomorrow's
politics, this is last night's Fox News. This is, this is last night's Sean Hannity or whomever you want. If there are fans here, I apologize. Anyway, that's why Mass was written.
I'd like to offer.
When will the men of, oh, you people of power, your hour is now. Wouldn't it be great if Bernstein's piece now were just a historical artifact looking back at a time when
Right.
when the people of power did not hold sway?
Right. Wasn't
And
that
yet,
quaint?
it is not. It is current.
We're contemporizing
It is
it.
current.
Yeah.
We're making it current as best we can,
Well,
you know.
The raw
So
material is all there.
it's there, and so in our discussions with the cast, we've
This
really.
is-
Oh yes, take a look at this is the set design.
This is the set
by
design.
Harry
This is gonna be
Feiner.
16 feet high and 70 feet across.
It's really amazing.
It's going to be the.
It's graffiti,
It's
obviously.
graffiti with.
Can I go through it?
Go ahead.
Okay, so here we have Anne Frank, sort of a surprise. This was John Lennon,
Yes.
Martin Luther King, Jesus,
JFK.
JFK, Joan of Arc, Gandhi, Anne Frank is over here. And there are other faces sort of buried, it's a world of martyred people. And then these are the stairs that all have on the front elevation, they all have graffiti, so that you're gonna have this sort of, so we could be in East Village, we could be in Times Square, we could be the old Times Square. But we could be in any place, especially sort of feels very New York to us, because that's where we're from. And we like this idea of working with a contemporary feel. I'm sorry?
These are not people that are looking. These are people who have rebelled.
Yes, there are people who have rebelled.
It's not just about the
Right. No, but
It's
but
about
these are,
saying no.
yes, yes, they're very strong people, yes.
I want to offer my overview of Lenny's music and his mission, his life's mission. There's not a single work of Bernstein's that doesn't end with a paean of hope. Candide, make your garden grow and grow and grow. Even though Lillian didn't like that kind of an ending, but it was begging the audience, be good to one another. Hine mato vumanoyim. Shevet achil gam yalhad. How wonderful it would be if all men could live together as brothers. In the second meditation, which was a big battle, leave it in, take it out, Bernstein deeply quotes the Beethoven Ninth. Allah mentioned, werden Brüder. All people should be brothers and sisters. And it ends with this great moment of personal. I remember Lenny saying, it might have been Gordon, I apologize, I don't remember specifically, but everyone on that stage, after they find the strength to get up, after having lost this leader, they have to decide if they can be their own celebrant, if there's going to yet be another celebrant, and when he sings with the boy at the end, is the baton passed? Will there be another Kennedy who will actually do the things that Kennedy was trying to do?
Right.
So that hope and promise is in there. It's in the Kaddish Symphony. It's certainly in Jeremiah. Not in Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a very dark piece, but it's a cry of pain. A 24-year-old kid is writing about the Holocaust. I mean, it's quite so. His concern with world peace is pervasive. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Jamie, I don't know if you disagree with me, but that's how I feel.
I don't disagree. In fact, you can really track it all the way through my father's pieces. This argument with his creator that he was having constantly about,
Kaddish.
if you love us so much, why are you letting so much bad stuff happen down here? That was his essential question, and kind of the essential question of the 20th century, and the question we continue to ask. So you can really trace this fist shaking all the way through his music, and it's so connected to his own personal background, because Sam Bernstein, his father, was a Talmudic scholar who was, immersed in the study of the Talmud, even though he was a businessman. And then my father had a lot of struggle with his own father, who didn't want him to be a musician, wanted him to inherit this wonderful hair and beauty supply business that he had gone to great trouble to create from nothing, having come over from Russia without a coin in his pocket. And, he was the immigrant's beautiful dream that he would work his way up and create this beautiful business and then be able to present it to his eldest son to run. It's like, this is the American immigrant success story. And then, what? You want to be a musician? You call that a living? Because back in the old country, to be a musician meant being this sort of homeless guy who trudged from shtetl to shtetl and played the fiddle at the wedding or the bar mitzvah, and they threw him a few kopecks and gave him a bowl of cabbage gruel and goodbye. On to the next village. So you call that a living. So, and I just have to quote the famous thing that my grandfather said after my father had his great debut at Carnegie Hall with the New York Philharmonic, when he had to step in for the ailing Bruno Walter. I thought ailing was Bruno Walter's first name. Some journalist heard that my grandfather had refused to pay for his son's piano lessons so as to discourage him from being a musician. And they said, "Is it true that you wouldn't pay for your son's piano lessons?" And Sam Bernstein famously replied, "Well, how was I supposed to know he would turn out to be Leonard Bernstein?" So he had this ongoing struggle with his biological and spiritual creator, and it was kind of a continuation of the same argument that he had all his life, and you can hear it in his music. And he always tried to come up with the hopeful ending. And so you can hear it. You're right that Jeremiah is on the fence, but you hear it in certainly in the Kaddish Symphony, and you hear
Age of Anxiety.
in Chichester Psalms, which I think is the last movement of Kaddish, actually.
Which ends with Hine mato vumanoyim.
Yeah, that's right. So, and you certainly hear it in Mass loud and clear. So it is the same.
One of the first composers,
Continuing.
one of the first conductors not to change his name. I went through a whole thing about "Are you a Jew?" when I was interviewed by Columbia Artist Management. I came back to Lenny and I said, "Who's this guy asking me my religion?" And he says, "That's nothing. Kuzovitsky told me I should change my name. Mit the name Bernstein, a job you'll never have."
It should be Leonard S. Burns.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what he told
So
me to
that was
change his name.
the way one made a career in those days. Lenny's the principal exception this is my name, and I'm going to make a career with this name. And that gave us all courage, not to bend our backs. Is that Boston Symphony violinist?
Who knew Lenny quite well, actually. One exception to the thought that his pieces end on a note of hope, I would think would be Trouble in Tahiti, which ends in hysteria and anxiety, as I remember. Is that why he went back and put 2 acts around it to make an opera?
That's a really great
Good question, my God.
I think, we would have to go sit in a bar to talk about that one, because it's a long. But it is true. Trouble in Tahiti is quite idiosyncratic in many ways. It's very personal. It's very, it's about a married couple, and it doesn't have this overlay of spiritual questioning, or we could say that he turns the spiritual questioning inward and makes it very human, very interactive between the couple. And then when he added the rest of the opera, the sequel, as it were, A Quiet Place, by then, he had lived so much more of his life, and it had his own very personal tragedy of losing his wife, my mother. And so all of that grief went into A Quiet Place. And then the ending of A Quiet Place is very cautious optimism, very cautious indeed.
Oh.
So I wouldn't say it's all the way to any kind of a happy ending. It's, there's a really big question mark hanging in the air, but it hangs in the air at the end of West Side Story too. We are really not sure, with the tritone, that F sharp in the double bass and the C major up here, and somewhere, somewhere.
He really liked the note. I noticed that it's in the excerpt that we heard tonight, the raised 4th step.
Yes.
That was his favorite signifier for ambiguity.
Yeah.
It's definitely true.
Questions?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Does anyone have questions?
About the music itself. The Mass being normally a somber and dark piece, and Lenny did such an incredible job when he added, the rock and blues, livening the piece. I also wonder, with his passion for interacting with the younger generation, if he wanted to use this as to appeal to the younger generation of the time.
That's interesting. I'll try. This is the first major work of Bernstein's that brings together his Broadway style, I don't like the word style, but his Broadway language and his symphonic language. And the piece cries out for that. The symphonic language is the Latin Mass accompanied by the pit orchestra. And the Broadway style is what happens on stage between the stage chorus, or the street chorus, and the street orchestra. It's a wind band, rock band, and a blues band. So he has these two levels going on, passing back and forth. I'm going to sing this in Latin, and what do you have to say about it in English? And that's what the joy of the piece is, which brings up a sore point for me, in that the piece has been done more, as a concert version, thank God it's being done, than it has as a stage version, where the musicians, the dancers, and the singers are integrated on the stage, which has been a big headache for us. But I insisted that we do it the way Lenny conceived the work. And that mix is very important. I don't know if I diverged from the basic idea that these two worlds, he could finally bring them together.
Well, let's have a little tussle.
Okay.
I think, well, it is true that it was the first time he used rock band and blues band. But I don't think it was the first time that he mixed the sensibilities of Broadway and symphonic music. In fact, I think all the way along he was always mixing them together and making concert music jazzy and making Broadway music symphonic. But I definitely think it's true, to answer your question, that he was reaching out to young people deliberately. And certainly my brother and sister and I were the direct guinea pigs for Mass. I think he was very much writing it directly to us, and I remember so many times when he would, come back from his studio at dinner time and with a manuscript in his hand and say, "Listen to this," and he would throw it on the piano and play us whatever cool, groovy thing he had just written. And of course, the answer always was, wow, that's great.
Gee, my children never say that to me.
Well, you know, I mean, you know, you cannot be more exposed than you are when you're writing something, creating something new, and so that's the moment when you need your gang to say, "Go for it! This is awesome!" And of course, it pretty much was.
But
I only have very small moments where I go, and one of them is just, you know, I'm going to share. One of them that my brother and sister and I always had trouble with back then is in Simple Song. When you suddenly hear that rock beat kicking it,
Right.
louder, louder,
Louder, yeah.
and at the time it felt to us like, oh, it's so rock, and it made us feel shy. But you know what? I'm over it now, because what at the time seemed like it was trying to be hip,
Yeah.
and therefore at the time seemed like it might almost be dated. Now it sounds
That
vintage.
That becomes a motive throughout the piece. It
Yes.
happens in Thank You. It happens in several places. That little rock motive, you know, just like West Side is based on the bebop motive.
Right.
The flatted fifth, we call it. So there is that. I got to tell you, having done this piece 7 times, 7 different productions, and knowing the score as well as I thought I did, I'm still seeing new stuff. It's just amazing to me. The overriding control of his material. The very opening of the piece is a marching band, ba-da-da. That becomes the motive of the entire work. It's right there every time. You're going to hear that again and again. It's just amazing how condensed it is in a way. And I want to talk about one moment when I didn't see Lenny assured of himself, because he always was, as you say, and he always drew us to say fabulous, fabulous, which it was. The first time I heard about the Mass, I was in Vienna, and Lenny was at the Sache with a big Büsendorf piano, and it was Rosh Hashanah night, and Passover, and he was trying to get me a seat at the Seder of the Israeli consulate. So he says, "I'm going to go call up," and on the piano was Thank You, and I fingered my way through it. It was so beautiful. It was so gorgeous. I said, "Lenny, that's gorgeous." And he went like this. My fingers don't do it anymore. I'm writing a Mass.
Wow.
I'm writing a Mass. You know, this kind of, I said, it's going to be great. We'll see. We'll see. It was this, I didn't see him at kind of overall confidence walking on the stage with the Philharmonic night after night and taking charge. It was a man wondering. Yeah.
But I think as a composer, he was always going like this. He was, you know, you're very exposed when you're creating.
yeah.
As a conductor, I think he had much more confidence, less anxiety. He was going to go out there and knew exactly what he was doing. But, you know, when you're putting notes on a blank page, that is a whole other level of risk.
And he said to me, after a season of conducting, I have to wait a month or 2 before I get everyone else's notes out of my head.
Yeah.
And by then it's time to go back to work.
Correct.
Yeah.
But then it's time to go back on the road.
Question,
Oh, there's a-
Gilad?
Okay. There's a question back here.
How much also did the death of, writing this for a dead president that the country's heart was still broken for, weigh into him? I mean, that has to be an extra, weight on your shoulders as you're putting.
It's a responsibility.
This is for the dead president.
Yeah.
I mean, did you ever discuss that at all with you?
A lot. And I mean, you know, I lived through the whole thing. And I was right there on the day President Kennedy was assassinated, and I watched my parents and my family and all their friends go through it. It was the day the shadow came down. Before that, all my memories of my childhood are just completely carefree and sunny, and my early memories of my parents and all their friends is that they just laughed all the time. And they stayed up all night screaming around the piano, playing word games and laughing. And I mean, I thought that all grown-ups did was have fun. I couldn't wait to be a grown-up because all they did was, laugh and scream and play games and sing around the piano and carry on, and it just seemed like a nonstop party. And then this day came, and I saw my parents and all their friends crying, and then the shadow came down, and I really felt like my parents and all their friends were processing the grief and the trauma of that day. From then on, nonstop. And of course, it was potentiated, it was reinforced every time the other big next horrible thing would happen. Looking back on it, it seemed to me as a little kid that from 1963 to 1968 was a very long time.
Yes,
But
hell.
now that I'm as old as I am, looking back, 5 years was nothing. And then all of a sudden, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and then Bobby Kennedy, another Kennedy, was assassinated, and then this war. And so there was this sense of nonstop travail, and I really do think that my father spent the rest of my life processing this grief and through his own works.
Oh, Gilad in the back had a question.
To just go back a little bit, about the rock element of this, because I listened to this piece for the first time a few months ago, instantly became my favorite piece ever, because.
It's a secret society around the world of this mass cult almost, these people who are just obsessed with this piece. So welcome to the
My brain was on the floor in my
society.
kitchen for 2 days after listening to it. I mean, like, honestly.
He's a tenor.
How much did,
Who sang
what was
rock?
that?
He's explaining that you're a tenor from
Oh,
Israel.
yeah, of course.
This is Gilad, who's an Israeli-born tenor. When I first heard him, he was singing, screaming rock songs on a microphone, but he's become a wonderful tenor.
So I was wondering because, for me, listening to this piece has been really interesting just in the way that Bernstein was so, you're saying vintage rock. I say rock because the end of the Dona Nobis
That's great.
is
Oh.
one of the most rocking pieces.
Oh, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I
It's
agree
the
too.
rockiness.
It's so hot.
I agree.
And I'm
Dun,
afraid of going to this concert and sitting next to people at the end of that piece, because that is, and really, it's also of the time musically, because this is 1971. So 1969 was the Deep Purple Concerto for Group and Orchestra that was performed in the Royal Albert Hall. First time that a band actually sat on stage with
an orchestra.
Malcolm Arnold at the time, sitting and playing together. Then, Jesus Christ Superstar is happening and all that. How much was your father aware of all of that? How much was
Yeah, I don't think he knew a thing about the Deep Purple.
No, I'm just wondering.
He got Steve
But-
Schwartz. He got
Because
Steve
Yeah.
the
Schwartz.
rock there was-
I bet we could turn the
real.
AC back
It's
on.
not-
Okay.
It's not a classical
Sort of
composer
hobbling
writing rock,
around.
because I know what it sounds like. A lot of
Right.
people, especially, because I do both idioms, you hear when there's a classical musician going into the rock idiom. It doesn't sound that way in this piece.
I know, but it was still, back then it was still all a little iconoclastic. And there were many people who were horrified at the idea of combining rock and orchestral music, like how dare he, and, talk about, what was the word that the lady in the balcony used? Sacrilege! Sacrilege! Yeah, that was sacrilege too.
Yes.
And of course, my father loved to
break
shake
barriers.
it up.
Was he listening to rock?
Yeah, you was. You bet. What do you think? You think we weren't gonna make him listen to what we were
Oh,
listening?
yeah, so I was wondering.
But we didn't have to make him because it's what he wanted to know. He always wanted to know what was going on. When we got in the car, he would turn the radio on and say, "Let's catch up." And really, I learned so much about music just by listening to the radio with my dad and playing him all my Beatles records and Simon and Garfunkel and everything that we were listening to. He was up on all of it, and R&B too. And in fact, he was much better educated to listen to, say, the Rolling Stones than I was. I thought the Stones were too rough, because I like the Beatles because they sang in tune. And I had no background about, essential roots blues. My father knew all about it, so when he heard the Stones, he got it totally. Way before I did. I had to catch up.
What Gilad
Talk
was
about let's catch up.
What Gilad was talking about is the last section when the walls come down and the liturgical choir joins the street choir, and the band, and everything
They
is
take off their
it's a
robes and
melee.
they're waving them around,
Yeah.
and everybody goes crazy,
Crazy.
and it's like a big
And
bacchanal.
what is the music? The blues. Blues changes, but 10-bar phrase, not 12. Very interesting how Lenny condensed 12 into 10, and he gave it another kind of a crack to it. Yeah.
And I was thinking about that moment today because he doesn't begin with the real rock mode. He starts in 3/4, straight. Donna no dim dun 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 like this. All of a sudden he goes dun dun dee dun 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 dun, and he turns it into 6/8
Right.
or 12/8. And then you go, oh my God, how did that happen?
It's also,
I mean, it's the simplest trick in the world. 3/4 and 6/8 take the same
Right.
amount of time.
but he's also,
But it's all about where and as soon as he introduces that first bass note in the offbeat, it takes off.
Yeah.
Because it comes out of a choral texture.
Right.
Oh, it's great.
It's great.
it's
Good
also
stuff.
filled with the foxy lady chord, the dominant 7 sharp 9.
There you go. There you go.
Foxy lady chord.
You know, one thing I have to say that we didn't say about Jamie is that she did Mass in 1981. She was in the street chorus
I
of
was
Mass
in the street chorus.
at the 10th anniversary
Which did
production
you
at the
sing?
Kennedy Center.
What song did you sing?
I was in the Confiteor.
Oh, great.
And she
I
was
don't
in it. It was
know
great.
where to
got to come back and do the celebrant at the Kennedy Center for the first time because that I'd never done. And I alternated with Joe Kalinsky, and Joseph Kalinsky was the celebrant on that television broadcast. Some of you may have seen in 1981. But Jamie was in that cast with me.
When I first
And I
met,
played the guitar on God Said.
And you played the guitar and
God.
guitar.
when I first met Jamie,
Said-
she was a folk guitarist who composed songs.
So, I guess you just decided. I mean, at that time, did you just say, "I want to be in the show"? Can I?
I
be in
don't
the show?
even remember how I wound up in that show.
Okay.
I don't
Well, you
remember.
did.
But you know,
I thought it was cool.
that was back in my singer-songwriter days, so
Mm-hmm.
it all seemed very much of a piece with
Well,
the stuff I was doing back
looked
then.
like you had fun to me.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
It was fun. Tom
It was-
O'Horgan directed it.
yeah.
It was-
Tom O'Horgan, who directed Hair on Broadway, didn't
Yes.
Right.
he? So it was
Superstar.
all very
Yeah, it was a
you know,
little
of a
different.
piece,
Yeah.
and it was different from the first one.
Yeah.
It was tons of fun.
You had a question before?
Yes, this is for the maestro. I know you build it sort of as, not the modern mass, but the mass of now. But do you feel a transition of your players and your artists and your musicians? Is there a momentum or a movement to where they can't help but being pulled back to the 60s and 70s?
No.
Are they building momentum in one way or another?
No, they understand the music immediately. We do a lot of American music, first of all, and we've done a lot of Bernstein, and they know the style to begin with, but they eat it up, I gotta tell you. The bands are eating it up.
That's what I.
Yeah,
that's
just
what I
getting them all to come to the
like
same
morphing
rehearsal, that's the
back to
headache.
that feeling.
That's the headache, but no, it doesn't feel dated musically. No, it does
No.
not. Does
Well,
not.
they get to wail too. We were
I
talking, one of our first discussions, Maurice and I, we talked about, is there a place in there where we can create sort of more of a contemporary sound? And the one place is in the Donna Nobis,
Right.
where there's this whole improvisational area, and that lady back there has some high chops. She does a gorgeous improv.
Oh, cool.
Oh, she just lets it go. But yeah, and so the guitar, rips it out, and it's a lot of fun.
I think Lorca should say something about when we did the mass the very first time. We were being fed the music the morning and at night, and in the morning we'd teach it to the cast, and Gordon would stage it in the afternoon. It was that quick. We never had a chance to see the work itself as in a totality. She has the advantage of having a recording with Lenny, of being able to study the text very carefully,
Right.
and it changed the way, and if we have friction, it's because I'm pulling back towards, this
way
is the
it
way
was
we did it.
done, the way it
And
was
I swore
done.
I'd never say that. I think I've said it once, but she is, speak.
Well, no, it's fun because that was my first question to you was, can we make it contemporary? you know, and
And
what
so
can we do to separate this production from that production?
Of course.
Which I think is very important, which was incredible production, my God, despite the budget. What I think they said you had an endless budget
Endless,
with that
yeah,
production.
it was amazing.
But that has nothing to do with what we're doing. I think what we've done is I teach script analysis. That's what I do at NYU. And so for me, I was really all about what's happening. Why are you saying what you're saying? What's going on? You know, how does this affect you? And so with each person, I've tried to spend some time trying to get an idea of why are we saying this now? And so the Ebola is not really a joke. There's this the end of the world. She sings that song, about the end of the world, and it's a woman who's afraid, and and so we talked about, think about all the things that are happening today. So what we've done with the cast too, we've tried to position certain members of the street chorus that reflect people of today. So we have somebody sort of Wall Street, and we have a homeless person, and we have an Occupy Wall Street, and we have, so we're balancing out who would we meet on 8th, or St. Mark's Place, it's not up anymore, on a Saturday afternoon, who just happened to be walking down the street. And that's kind of how we bring them all together. So I think it's very contemporary. And even the song, which I know was written by Paul Simon, the line.
Oh, the lyric.
Yeah, the line where he says, half the people are stoned and the other half are waiting for the next election. And, half the people are stoned. And it's not tripping on LSD, it's OxyContin or whatever, the drug of choice that people have abused, and the addict nation, once again, unfortunately. So it's sort of, there's some depression. There's a lot of depressing moments in here because you kind of feel like maybe we've passed this, but we have not. And trying for me to find a through line has been extremely easy because it's still there. And so there's this ever prevalent need for a celebrant to be celebrated, look with Obama. We were talking about Obama, and yes, we can, and that huge movement, of people coming out in the arenas, and what was it, 50,000 people, 100,000 people coming out to see him. And I was terrified the guy was going to be shot. We all were. So, and he hasn't been, knock, knock, but God almighty, it's terrifying. So it really brings it home for us, I think. That sort of encapsulates a little bit.
Question? Yes.
Liz, this is Liz. She's in the cast. Why doesn't all the cast stand? Who's here? I think,
Yes.
Elise, Liz.
Aren't they gorgeous?
So my question was actually, it's been incredibly humbling working on this piece of music. I've absolutely loved every second of it. Do you have any advice or any suggestions for the members of the street chorus of, maybe a feeling or something that you want to give as your own personal advice for something to feel?
It's a good question. Well, I think what my father's personal expression was for the street chorus, it has a lot to do with the celebrant. I think he really saw himself as the celebrant. I don't think any of us is too surprised to realize that this was really kind of a reflection of himself, that he had this essential pure desire to share, to play music, and to reach out to people and embrace them and make the world a happier place. And then the more successfully he is able to do that, the more demands are being made upon him by the people around him. And so the celebrant, as you know, as the piece continues, they put more and more vestments on him until he's completely weighted down by the burden of the stuff the people put on him. That's the actual physical manifestation
You see it.
of the responsibility that he's burdened with as the person who's absorbing everybody's expectations and demands, until finally he actually crumbles under the weight. So if you're in the street chorus, you're the ones who are shaking your fist at the celebrant, saying, come on, you're the one we put all our hopes in, and you're the one who's supposed to bail us out, and we have all these problems, and so come on, you're supposed to help us here. And so there, you know, the resentment builds and builds because the expectation keeps building and building. And you know, when you think of, you know, if you're a person who was excited about Obama and voted for Obama, you know, the amount of hope and expectation that we put on that guy when he came into the White House, and of course he was handed the most gigantic shit sandwich in the history of mankind, which he was then supposed to turn into some delicious petit
Caviar.
four.
Yeah.
And, you know, so of course it was all gonna, you know, fall apart. And as we, you know, heaped our expectations on him, I think that that's a situation that you can think of as a parallel to
And
to
we've
what you're
split
doing
the
in the street
chorus.
chorus.
We've
Lorca,
split the chorus.
explain that, Lorca. This is very interesting.
Yeah, just in trying to think about who's doing what, you know, and why. We split the chorus, so she sings "Hurry," so beautifully, I must say. Candace does. So she's sort of on the stronger questioning side, and she comes in later with the Agnus Dei, and whereas we have other people coming in the Sanctus Sanctus that are more on the we're sorry we danced crazily, we're sorry we did a couple of
Still
bad
pleading,
things,
yes.
take us back in, and he takes them back in, and then in come Agnus Dei, you know, so it's fun, but we have sort of warring factions a little bit.
That was interesting. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't
Yeah,
want
no, it's fine.
Okay. Gordon Davidson struggled to find an anti-celebrant in the original production. He says this is a one-dimensional thing. I've got to find an anti-celebrant. It was
Judas.
it was
We have 6.
and you became a man
Non-credo.
non-credo.
Yeah, we have
And it was-
6.
Non-credo, the non-credo baritone.
Yeah,
became
and very
the
strong, positive
principal
guy
first one, and the first one who was ready to jump.
to jump.
To
So he
jump on
became
the
the
celebrant.
attacker.
He
led the revolt.
And you can see that in his physicalization even before he sings non-credo.
Yeah.
Gordon worked. I was just going to mention Gordon Davidson.
That was his idea.
director's
Gordon said,
role.
"I have to find someone who's the non-credo. It was
Right.
a non-celebrant."
But I think no two members of the street chorus are alike. And
Yeah.
here's your
That's
director
right.
right here, and
Right.
probably stating the obvious. No two are alike, and it was not surprising sometimes for me to see a member of the street chorus hanging on to the last possible second
She's got one.
before finally they get pulled into the maelstrom
yeah.
of
Right.
the rock.
Yeah.
Dona Nobis, the Agnus Dei.
So in
Last possible minute, you know.
in LA, we did a thing called mini mass. It was 12 singers, 4 or 5 musicians. It was fascinating. Boiling this huge piece down into this chamber opera. And Lenny came out to hear it. And the cast said, he said he wanted to have a sit down with the cast. So they all sat around. He said, well, have you any questions? And 1 or 2 of the members of the small cast said, you know, I don't buy into the ending. I'm not prepared to say, lauda, lauda, laude. There's still a part of me that's unhappy, unfrustrated. I can't wait. I want it now. And so Lenny said, I understand that. And we put it, and he wait in silent, he waits in silent treason
Silent
until
treason
reason is restored. He put that in at the very end, after the masses ended, no, just before the masses ended, with the Amen, and you hear the singers sing those lines.
Wow.
And we wait for the coming of the Lord. I have that piece of paper with it.
That's so interesting. They put that in at the end.
At the end, we did it one night, and he pulled it.
Never again.
Never again. But there is this, so if this helps you,
We
and
have an ending.
you don't have to, it doesn't have to be a love-in.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a love-in. I think Lorca's trying to create that.
More tension.
Well,
you
we
know.
have one moment that we're going to do at the end, which is kind of a little surprise.
Oh, what's the hurry?
Don't tell us.
You're not gonna tell. Oh, I want to know when it is.
No, you gotta come. You gotta buy. Everyone in this room has to buy 100 tickets.
You know,
I'll tell you after.
that's the last thing I want to say, everyone. This is Queens. If we had a Manhattan venue, we'd be sold out now. I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. And people have to be encouraged to make that trip.
Right.
So if you have friends who are, it's not so terrible. 3 people in a car, $30, they'd be out there and back, and it's worth the trip, I promise you. So
Well, they heard
please,
Victor. He's
please
fabulous.
help us. Yes.
Right.
One more comment? Yes.
I have a question. when he was writing the piece, how much was he thinking about the relationship of this mass to the great masses that were probably conducted in other
Ah.
Solanus, the Mass.
Right.
Do you want to answer that?
I can't.
You can or you can't?
Cannot.
Oh. Well, I mean, he had all the masses he had ever studied and conducted rattling around in his head,
Yeah.
clearly. So he must have been thinking about them while he was writing his own. And, you know, the burden of the past lies heavy on any artist's shoulders. So I think that to make his mass as personal as it could be, he decided to make it contemporary. And so I think that I think he used the structure of the mass as, you know, it was really his clothesline on which he could hang all these contemporary burning issues and controversies. So I think that he saw the mass as an absolutely ironclad structure that he could use to carry all his contemporary ideas. And so in that sense, I think that the mass was a structure that was free to him to use in any way he wanted. So in that sense, I think that he felt he didn't feel constrained by what had come before.
Every movement of the Mass is challenged in one way or questioned in one way in English. And that's Bernstein saying, do I really believe in credo, in one God? I'll believe in 20 gods.
You know the passage in the understated uses London's Beethoven, which is interrupted by war drums. When the Dona Nobis Pace,
Yeah.
the Beethoven Mass, is interrupted by war drums.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, I know.
You must have known all that.
Of course.
Well, he did it in Chichester Psalms.
The Gloria from Mrs. Solemnis at the opening of the center. I had the sense that the Mrs. Solemnis was the deepest thing it had bathed in his mass.
That's the biggest, that's the best of all.
I have
Yeah.
a feeling the Britain War Requiem with all the troping of other texts must have had some influence also.
I don't think he knew that at the time. They were written at the same time.
What was written
Yeah, they're right at the same time. The year after I did the Mass, I went up to Boston to hear the War Requiem and said, that's not as good as ours. It's a wonderful piece, by the way.
In Lenny's time, the same way they taught it when I was there, they made you memorize the ordinary of the Mass in both Latin and English, and it tested you on it.
Wow.
Because the study of music history was from Machot through
course.
virtually every genius in history,
Right.
a Mass, and it was there. The absorption would be very thorough and very early.
A universal form is what he called it.
Yeah.
And the other thing he said at that meeting, there were some things I can't say in public that he said, but the other thing he said at that meeting is there are mysteries we cannot explain. We just must accept. There are mysteries we cannot explain. And that helped me, I must tell you. You know, I want to know why this goes there and why this is. Don't ask, just do it.
Yeah.
And see how the whole thing works.
Well, since we can't know all the answers, this might be a good moment to thank you all. To thank Victor Starsky,
Yes.
Hey,
Michael Hume, Walter Perez, Jamie Bernstein, and Maurice Perez. I'm Edward Smallone.
it's great, man.
I thank you all.
Really.
It really is wonderful. We have a few minutes. We can linger if you'd like. There are a few little snacks in the back.